An NBA team that used to make moves for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, Pau Gasol, and Anthony Davis now is grossly overpaid for a center that played 5 games last season. A team that used to win NBA championships and compete for titles, 17 championships to be exact, if you count the 5 from Indianapolis that probably shouldn't count, but they do anyway. The Los Angeles Lakers are no longer interested in competing for NBA championships. They're not in the title business anymore. Not with the way that they built this roster. They have very little cap flexibility. They have little to no draft assets for the foreseeable future. And they're very much lacking on the defensive end of the court. We know in order to win a championship, you have to be able to play defense. We see it year after year. You have to be one of the top teams on both ends of the basketball court, or you will not be good enough to compete with the top teams in our league. The Los Angeles Lakers are paying 73% of their cap space to Luka Doncic, Austin Reaves, and Walker Kessler. And surrounding those players, they are very lacking in talent and defense, specifically perimeter defense. And today they traded DeAndre Ayton for Jaden Hardy and a couple second-round picks, giving them only a 2032 first-round swap and 3 second-round picks to work with as far as any sort of trade, assets that they can use to build their roster. In a span of a couple hours, this team signed and traded pretty much their entire offseason at once. They signed a player, and I'm not even going to try to say his full name, but Mamu is kind of the short way. He played for the Raptors last year. He plays forward for them. He averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds. He shot 39% from three-point range, but he's not good on the defensive end of the court. The Lakers gave him 4 years, $52 million. They also signed Colin Sexton, a backup guard who averaged 15 points and 3 assists last year, got moved around, but finished the season with the Chicago Bulls, 2 years, $19 million. And then Quentin Grimes, a decent defender, a guy who can play perimeter defense, averaged 13, 3 and 3 last year for the 76ers, 4 years, $60 million. If you look at this Los Angeles Lakers roster, their starting lineup will more than likely be Luka Doncic, Austin Reaves, Quentin Grimes, Mamu, and Walker Kessler. Off the bench, they're going to have Colin Sexton, Jaden Hardy, Jake LaRavia, Jared Vanderbilt, Bronny James, and they have rookie Cameron Carr that they just drafted. This team doesn't play defense. I have no idea how they think this team is going to compete in the Western Conference when you were looking at opposing guards. The San Antonio Spurs have Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox. Who's defending those guys? The Oklahoma City Thunder have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, back-to-back MVP. The Denver Nuggets, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic. What in the world are the Lakers Rob Pelinka specifically thinking with the way that he built this team? What it seems like and what it sounds like is that Luka Doncic is making a significant impact in the moves the Lakers are making. He wanted a big man that would play defense and he could throw lobs to, in Walker Kessler. A player he's a good basketball player. He only played 5 games last year, 58 the year before that, so he has not done a great job staying on the basketball court. But Walker Kessler's a good basketball player, but giving up a 2031 first and a 2033 first, and then swaps in 2028 and 2030, and then paying him 4 years, $130 million is not good business. That is not setting yourself up for success. And when teams panic and they make moves like that, it really handicaps them, especially in this modern NBA, with the aprons, with the salary cap, and how hard it is to keep expensive players on your roster. You have to be very, very smart about the players that you're signing, the players that you're drafting, and the assets that are important. Draft capital is more important than ever because the ability to have young players on cheap contracts is going to be very important. You look at teams like the Spurs, like the Thunder, who have really been able to compete because they're not paying a lot of their players high dollars. And the teams that are paying multiple players a ton of money have had to find ways to get off of those contracts. Specifically, we saw the Boston Celtics do that. We've seen multiple other teams find ways to move their expensive contracts if you don't think that you're good enough to compete for a championship. But the Lakers are really handicapping themselves. And I guess with this trade, DeAndre Ayton for Jaden Hardy and the 2 first-round picks, sounds like they could take Jaden Hardy and those second-round picks and swap it for some other player. But is that really significantly helping your team? You have no backup big man right now. You have Jared Vanderbilt, Jake LaRavia, Jaden Hardy, Colin Sexton coming off the bench. Jared Vanderbilt couldn't see the floor last season. Jake LaRavia is, he's pretty decent on the offensive end of the court for a backup forward. Jaden Hardy, like I said, they might be moving him. And Colin Sexton is a high energy guard, doesn't really pass the basketball. But what is the goal of this basketball team? Because if it's to win an NBA championship, it is not happening this season. You look at the Western Conference and some of the top teams in there. The Lakers have not done a good job building their team to compete with the top teams in the Western Conference. And you're replacing LeBron James and Rui Hachimura with Mamu and Quentin Grimes. I'm struggling to see how that's an improvement on how you think this team is going to be better than they were last season. Now, I know in the playoffs that Luka Doncic was struggling with injuries and Austin Reaves was struggling with injuries, but those are 2 players that need to take better care of their body, specifically Luka Doncic. And while I think Nico Harrison made a terrible trade in the value he got back for Luka Doncic, I don't think he was totally wrong in being a little nervous about how Luka Doncic would age. We know he doesn't eat right. We know he doesn't take care of his body and condition very well in the offseason. And Luka's a player that I like. I'm not trying to rip him, too much. But as he gets older, into his late 20s, early 30s, it's not a player that you feel super confident that those, hamstring injuries and those, muscles, you would imagine that he will have soft tissue injuries. That's what I'm trying to say. You imagine that Luka will struggle with soft tissue injuries as we go on in his career if he doesn't learn to take better care of his body. And he's pretty far into his career at this point. You have to believe if he's going to do it, it has to be now. So looking at this team and the way that they've built it around Luka, the thing that's so frustrating is the same players that you need around Luka Doncic are the players that you needed to build around LeBron James. And they didn't do a good job building this team with LeBron over the last few years, and it's just carried over into the way that they've built around Luka Doncic. Now, I know it would have been a disaster to lose a player in Austin Reaves, for no assets. You didn't get a chance to trade him. He's not on your team anymore. That would have been really brutal. But you're paying him 25% of your cap space. He's very similar to Luka in the fact that, he handles the basketball. Not good on the defensive end of the court, but he handles the basketball. He sets his teammates up, you don't mind having 2 primary ball handlers. But then, you have Colin Sexton coming in off the bench making about $10 million a year. But Luka, $50 million is 30% of your cap, and he'll be 30% of your cap for the next few seasons. Austin Reaves, 25% of your cap, and that'll only go up by like a percentage point or 2 over the next few years. The Lakers are not set up for success in a Western Conference that's deep, in a Western Conference that's talented, in a Western Conference that has a bunch of smart GMs. They made a trade with the Utah Jazz, a team that I am very high on. I would not do business with Danny Ainge if I was other teams. He has taken advantage of so many bad GMs in the past. You think back to his time in Boston, when he traded an old Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and he got back the draft capital that ended up being Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Danny Ainge has built a team in Utah that is super talented, super young, and has a ton of draft capital for the future. And it's just so different than the way that the Lakers are building their team. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they have young players, cheap players, and a ton of draft capital. The Lakers are not able to compete with the smart GMs in the Western Conference. And, I've thought for some time that Rob Pelinka is not one of the top GMs in the NBA. He's someone that they've needed to move on from for a long time. I know he has relationships to people in the organizations, but they just got bought out, by the owner of the Dodgers. And the Dodgers, we know, are one of the smartest teams in baseball. They're one of the richest teams. They spend a ton of money, but they've won back-to-back championships for a reason. And these new owners are not going to accept a Los Angeles Lakers team that'll squeak into the playoffs, I imagine, next season, maybe even the play-in game, and not be real contenders in the Western Conference. So if you're someone that believes in the Lakers, I'd love to hear why, because this team is not good enough. And I know there's been a bunch of jokes going around calling them the Snowtime Lakers because of the amount of white players they have on this basketball team. But it is kind of interesting because a lot of those guys are not great at perimeter defense. Luka Doncic, Austin Reaves, we know they're not good on the defensive end of the court. Mamu, who's European, I believe, not great on the defensive end of the court. And yes, he shoots a high percentage from three, decent rebounder, 11 points a game. A player like that can't play high minutes for you if he can't defend. Because when you're playing these fast guards, these elite guards in the Western Conference, you have to have a player that can go out there and make it difficult on that team. Because even though you're great offensively, this Lakers team should be, that is not enough if you can't ever get stops. You're not going to win 4 rounds in the playoffs if you can't get stops. And the Lakers have really been, it's really under talked about because LeBron James going there and then them trading for Anthony Davis. But this organization has not been well run since the end of Kobe's era. They were paying Kobe a ton of money. And as they transitioned out of there, this was one of the worst teams in basketball, if you remember. There's a reason they got the 2nd overall pick and drafted Brandon Ingram. They got the 2nd overall pick and drafted Lonzo Ball. This team was not functioning as a high intelligence, high-level organization, and then they got lucky that LeBron James chose to go to Los Angeles and move his family there. He wanted to do movies. He had business there. LeBron came. He kind of forced their hand in making a trade for Anthony Davis, and they won a championship in 2020. But other than that, this team has not made a lot of intelligent decisions, and I think that you look at the way that their team is built this year, I think it's only going to continue in that direction. It's a team that is not going to, be a great basketball team this season, but they also don't have the assets for 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And it's going to be a tough few years if you're Lakers fans, in my opinion. It'll be very interesting to see how they compete in the Western Conference, if there's any more moves they're able to make, but they don't have a lot of flexibility. Not a ton of, big ticket players that could bring back a ton of draft assets, because you imagine they're not going to trade Luka Doncic. They probably won't trade Austin Reaves. And other than that, who's your player that's highly desirable from other teams? Obviously, Walker Kessler, they just traded a ton for, so you're not just going to go and immediately flip him. I just don't like what they're doing. They need someone in the front office who is a little more up to date with the times, and I don't think Rob Pelinka is that. It feels like they're listening to Luka a little too much, giving him shooting and a defensive lob-catching big. They have to have more. This team is not good enough to compete in the Western Conference. And as a Celtics fan that's been struggling over the last 2 days with the Jaylen Brown trade, this brings me a little bit of joy to see the way that they've built their roster. And I can't wait to watch it. If you love the NBA, make sure you take a second to subscribe to the channel. We're about to hit 1,500 subscribers. We may have already hit it by the time this video is released. But I appreciate y'all watching. Cyborg out.